So today we're talking about in-season training for athletes is the main meat of this episode. I have Coach Caleb Predmore with me, and you can introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Sounds good. So I'm a strength coach with Dynamic Sports Training, or DST, out here in Arizona. So work with Arizona Christian athletic teams and various private clientele, along with high school athletes over at Phoenix Christian. So Arizona Christian, the teams I work with are football, men's basketball, men's volleyball, wrestling, swim, men's golf, along with, as a company, we work with various professional athletes, one of the main things being with baseball. And so it's a mixture of everybody from elementary age people to professional athletes.
Glad to have you on. Obviously, you got some experience, so definitely wanted to kind of obviously get your take on this subject. We'll get right into it. The first one is just talking about in-season training for athletes. We're talking all sports. What advice can we give athletes that are looking to, get to the next level, become elite, whatever it is, but they don't have a strength coach, they don't have a performance coach, they don't have the resources, right? What advice can we give to athletes, let's say, that don't really know much about the performance world, strength world, speed world, whatever it is? And so obviously we know that strength training in season is mandatory, right? We know this is something that's not like new knowledge. So what would you say is kind of like the number one thing that you would tell an athlete about strength training in season?
Well, from a broader perspective, like a reason to train in season is, depending on your sport, it could be 3 months, give or take, but take a third of the year off from any type of training, and then everything you did over the off season, where does that go in 3 months? So
right,
can't take that time off. It's still time to make some progress, as well as maintain what you did, but also it's not about breaking your body down as much as you would in the off season as when it comes into in season.
And I think it's becoming common knowledge now that strength training in season is essential to maintaining, right? We understand that the bulk of the gains that you see with speed, strength, all that stuff, it comes in the off season or the preparatory phase. And so we know that athletes that don't strength train, once they hit their competition phase, you end up with all the volume and without the weight room stimulus, you lose the strength, essentially. You lose the gain. So that's why, in order to maintain, elite performance, whatever you gained in the off season, you have to strength train, right? We have to strength train. But and I think I've had this conversation with you, this is something that we talked about, what I've brought up before, is speed training in season. And that's kind of why I started on here, is because I recently was on a webinar with Coach Tony Holler, and it was Zach Decant as well was on there. But they were kind of giving me a new perspective on training in season that wasn't just strength training, because we know strength training, obviously. But they allowed me to kind of look at training through the lens of speed and not just strength. And I think that was so beneficial, because me working with the athletes that I work with, I was like, obviously strength training, we want to make sure we stay strong, right? Because power comes from strength, right? It's a component. So obviously that was something that I had already programmed, but which I worked on speed, but I didn't look at it through the lens of speed. And after kind of being on a webinar with them, I think it was Universal Speed Rating, I've been able to kind of program differently, and you can see the gains, or at least the retaining gains of speed training in season. With my athletes, I've been able to, and they were saying, what I learned was that you could program speed and it's only 15 minutes, right? We understand that you can have a speed stimulus, right? Work on top speed, velocity, acceleration, in just 15 minutes. And that's actually what I do, because most of my athletes are soccer players. They're all in season right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I get in the first 15 minutes speed training, right? And what I found data-wise is their speed has actually not only been kept from going down, right, from being slower, but they've actually gotten faster in season in combination with the higher volumes, with the trainings and the more games, you know what I mean? So I think that's super beneficial when you not only look at it from strength, but from speed. So I don't know what your take is on looking at it through like a speed lens.
Well, yeah, because that's definitely something, like in the sport of soccer, you don't want to be able to lose your top-end speed of being able to run fast, because if you lose that, pretty important, depending on your position.
Right.
So that's good that maintaining that throughout.
But I think because their argument essentially, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the argument was every athlete benefits from speed training because every athlete has a component of speed or acceleration, right? That is useful in their in their match or their game, whatever their competition. Not just soccer players, but even combat sport athletes. When we're talking about MMA, boxing, stuff like that, that the stimulus, obviously we know that the hamstring, there's nothing that compares to the amount of fiber recruitment, motor recruitment of the hamstring than sprinting, max sprinting, like full out sprinting. So if you think about combat sports where you're kicking, right, if you want to have it more efficiently, more strong, more powerful, there's no better way than to sprint train.
Mm.
And that's unorthodox, you would think, right, for a combat sport athlete. But the argument was that all athletes, basketball, volleyball, all would benefit from speed training in season, just to get that stimulus.
I think that, yes, you could, but also can come down to like time allotment.
Time management.
Well, yeah, like what do you have time for? I guess in a way.
Like what's most important?
Not what's most important, but are you talking like in a now setting, or are you still trying to gauge to like more like resource?
I just mean like right now.
Like in general? Okay, I got you.
Like with coaches, essentially, just like coaches right now, like we know, obviously, everybody strength trains. Everybody strength trains too. We know that. Like we have studies, right? But what I think...
Like if you were on your own, here's what you... Like advice for that?
Yeah, I guess, because what I'm trying to bring up is that that's not something that's orthodox or like common knowledge to speed train in season. But when you think about it, because then I had the epiphany when I was on that webinar, when I was just like, you know what? That's so true, right? We need to expose these athletes to that high power stimulus of sprinting, even in season, to maintain their speed, to maintain their their motor recruitment, stuff like that. Essentially, it's like, what's your take on that? Like, because it's unorthodox.
The hard part with that is, I would agree. Like, yes, if you can, absolutely. But then, like, sometimes, like in a team setting or just environment setting, it's harder. Like, if you only see people for an hour. And then, like, what do you have available?
So essentially, it's programming.
Not just programming. Because, like, so if you were on your own, trying to figure out your own training, I think it would be important that, yes, try to hit some sort of speed, stuff like that. But it's also important, or like a lot of things you see sometimes with other stuff, is people not taking rest times or just burning themselves out. So then when people engaging themselves on speed, stuff like with that, that's not necessarily good in season. But like what you said, if like your 15-minute session at the start, get it done quick, low volume, get good rep,
right?
Good, get the stimulus, be able to get that, get done, move on to your strength training. That's
100%. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Burning with like burnout. That's another thing too that we can talk about. Which we can talk about with that whole. We'll get to peaking fresh and recovery modalities and stuff like that. Volume management, load management. Yeah, obviously for athletes, we want them to essentially not lose their gains in season. That's the number one thing, right? Of course, I'd say number two. Number one is performing, competition, right?
Win games.
Yes, win games. Come out with the W. That's number one. But what we're trying to talk about as performance coaches and strength coaches, all the gains that you spent, the money you spent with in the weight room, or the time you spend in the weight room in the off season. If you don't, right, I think it's more of a detriment to not strength train or speed train in season. What you're looking at is after the season's over, you're back to square one.
Yeah.
Right. You went 2, 3, 4, then you hit season. Now you're back to square one. Now you got to hit the gym again. Right. Versus if we can retain some of those adaptations, right?
Especially with the residual of it being 5 to 7 days, depending on what you read or what you look at.
Right. Then we can now go square. Season's over. We're at square. Now we can go 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. We're not back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
So as an athlete, obviously we want to recommend you make sure you strength train in season. That's obviously a big one. Also speed train. So we want to not lose speed. We want to not lose agility and not lose change of direction ability. And then a third one is obviously maintenance. So that's the topic of training in season, is to maintain. We want to maintain the adaptations. We're stronger, we're faster, we're bigger, we're more powerful. The focus of in-season training is to not lose.
Well, there can be a spectrum of that, because even I think I was talking with somebody today about that, of there's a spectrum of not to lose where you go so low on stuff to where very, very, very minimal, which, yeah, you do want the minimum dose in season to be able to get that. So there's a spectrum of where you can go along, I guess, and then see what works best for your athletes too, or just kind of knowing where people are at going into the season. And then also a way to go about it is when you're looking at higher minute people or lower minute people. So like if people are playing a significant amount of time, they're getting a lot of snaps, those are people that less on the volume, even more. But it's say if you're a third string, you maybe get a couple minutes a game or something like that. Then at that point, having more work is beneficial because you're not getting as much playing, so you still should be more focused on development throughout in season.
Right. And I think the thing is that I think the general understanding of training in season gets a bad rep because people are saying, you're burning out, you're frying yourself out. And I think if you do it correctly, which that's the meat of it, right, is it needs to be short, not high in volume, but it has to be intense, right? We understand
heavier lift.
We understand it's got to be, the intensity is got to be between, I think it's 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max. Now the volume's lower, but what you want to do is essentially expose your body to higher motor recruitment, right? Obviously, we understand the higher loads, higher percentages, you have higher motor recruitment, and that's what's going to maintain, right? Because we know people think when you're in season, you want to do high reps, low weight, just to stay, whatever they say, like not burn out.
But all it does is just burn down your body.
It does exactly
the opposite, because you break down your muscles, you break down your body.
More fatigue,
and then you go practice. More fatigue, you break it down your body. Depending on how you recover, how you eat, that's a whole other topic. More fatigue, and so you can keep stacking that if you go that route versus what we were talking about with short, high intense.
Right, and 100%. And essentially, you're actually weakening. Your 1 rep max and your strength will actually go down if you work in a high rep range with low, not as heavy weight, right? Which is the opposite of what everybody, general public thinks. They think, okay, when I'm in season, go high reps, go super lightweight, don't want to kill. But actually, essentially, what you're doing is actually fatiguing the body, and you're actually losing strength in the meantime. So, the exact opposite. If you're an athlete and you want to maintain your gains in season, right? You want it to be very heavy, very fast, but keep to a short session. So it's got to be short, intense, sharp. Expose your body to those high stimulus, high rate of force development stimulus, get in, get out, right? That's how you maintain.
Well, even in general, don't really need to be doing 2-3 hour workouts.
Right. Well, it's
Body ends up like even like off season, still get the bang for your buck. You can do more volume and stuff like that, but the longer you drag sessions on, the more you just
yeah.
beat yourself down, for lack of better words. And then
You get away with it in the off season, but
yeah, when you don't have practices and you don't have games, things are a little bit different. You feel like you can recover a little bit more.
I'm gonna move on to. Well, actually, before I move on, I'll bring up study. Do you have any studies to bring up about that? About strength training in season?
Let me see if I wrote anything down.
I do have one.
There's like another side, I guess, of speed training just from what I've been listened to or talked to with people. And I think we talked about this one time about like how, I mean, if you have the technology to do it, being able to track, not because like there's some people, if you have the technology to do it, being able to track if people hit certain max velocity percentages in practice or not, and then being able to go from there.
That's right.
So if you're in a situation where you have things like that, that's another way to go about it too. But
Right.
that's at a certain level and you're going to have more access to things like that.
Yeah, I also think that's tough in season. Right. Right. Because I think the essentially the audience that we're trying to reach is more you're on your own type of thing, and it's like, what can I do? I'm an athlete. I'm trying my best. And what can I do? And what's the advice to become elite, stay at the top, or get to the top? And we need to strength train.
One thing for like with speed then would just being able to at some point be able to hit some qualities of acceleration, some qualities of max velocity, and then some qualities of various decel work or force absorption, and then be able to keep those qualities throughout the season. And that can even things like decel or force absorption, that can be stuff done in the weight room too. That doesn't have to necessarily be. There's ways you can mix that in, or you can also set aside time for it too, depending on. Yeah.
Right. So I think the bulk of it is basically, train what you don't want to lose.
Like that.
Don't think that by playing games and matches that you're going to retain the power, the strength, and the speed that you gained in the off season. I think is the general summary.
Okay.
But I do want to bring up this study. Very brief. It's from, here we go, let me bring this up here. Journal of Strength and Conditioning. Okay. This is just basically pointing to what we're saying. Effects of in-season strength maintenance training, and it was pro soccer players. Essentially, they followed a strength program in the off-season, all of them, twice a week. They made gains. When competition came, one group did strength training once a week. The other group did strength training every other week.
Okay.
And they basically measured their gains. Where were they at? And they found that the strength training session, the guys that trained once a week, at least, they maintained strength, sprint, jumping, everything that they had in their prep, their preseason. And on the other hand, the group that trained every other week, so about a week more of a break, they reduced all of their gains in strength, sprint. The only thing they didn't lose as greatly was their jumping ability. But and they did the exact same program, just by doing it less frequently. They both did the same reps, sets, volume, everything. They did it every other week instead of every week, and they all lost gains, and the ones that did every week all kept their gains, right? And we're only talking once a week. We're not talking twice, 3, 4 times a week. We're talking strength training once a week, and they're short sessions too. I think they're about 45 minutes. Once a week is all it takes to keep the gains right and essentially stay at square 3 or 4 instead of go back to square 1.
What's the biggest thing with any type of training, whether you're training for your sport, for your skill, whether you're training various things in the weight room? If you sporadically do anything, if you sporadically study for a test, you're not going to be able to do well on the test. If you only, so it's 4 weeks out, study week 1 once, week 3 maybe once,
right,
and walk in test day, you're not going to do very well, or you're not going to be able to retain as much. But like in the terms of working out, frequency is the most important thing. You're able to build upon that as your body adapts to what you're doing. And so then from there you can see progression or maintenance, or if you're in season, whatever, however you want to phrase that.
Right, like with anything. Obviously, if your body's not exposed to it as much as you know, the use it or lose it principle, right? So, okay, we'll move on to sport-specific training, my favorite. The reason why is because people don't understand sport-specific training. Okay, what do I mean by that? Is people think sport-specific training means you are doing
your skill with
a basketball dunk with weights on you, or you're doing a volleyball pass with resistance.
Yeah,
they think that's when we talk about sport-specific training for athletes, what we're talking about is movement patterns. We're talking about energy systems. We're talking about kinetic chain requirements. That is what makes it sport specific. We're not talking about sport skill. A lot of parents I hear all the time, they're looking for sport specific training for their athletes. But what they think that is, or what they think they need, is a trainer that replicates the sport from an on-field or on-court and make it similar in the weight room. But that's not what we want. That's not what we're looking at, right? What us as coaches, and I've had this conversation with you 100 times, that what we want to do as coaches is essentially expose the athletes to different stimulus and make them resilient.
What I'd add on to like sports specific is, especially at a younger age, a lot of people just need to get generally stronger. Because a lot of people, I mean, if it's your first time not lifting, there's a lack of strength, or there's a lack of just that quality. And then when it comes to sport specific stuff, that's where more like accessory work or different in general, like accessory work can come in. Like if you're, say, volleyball or baseball, there's where arm care and taking care of things like your rotator cuff, scap, or like tennis, taking care of your elbow. That's where more of, along with the energy systems like we were talking about, that's where more sport specific things can come into play. Is taking care of those smaller details that can help keep you healthy or strengthen areas that maybe you're not going to get with your movements of your presses, your pulls, your squat variations, or hinges or whatnot.
That's kind of what I call face value. And what I mean by that is soccer players, right? Outside of energy systems, needs analysis, making them resilient, they got needed leg work, right? Because that's face value. Pitchers, baseball players, you just said it, arm work, volleyball players, arm work, that's face value stuff, right? That's what makes it sport specific, but we're not essentially taking the pitcher and making them pitch with a weight on their arm, right? That's not sport specific. What we want is, again, like I was saying, you want to make them resilient, so essentially give them abilities that allow them to then transfer to their sport.
Enhance general qualities that can then apply with that of being strength, power, and that's such and that then you have to practice your sport in order to become good. Something like baseball, there's so much skill involved with that. Like I'm sure you've heard of like trying to hit a baseball is the hardest thing in the world.
Right.
Or hardest thing in sports. And because there's so much skill involved. If you're trying to hit a circular thing with a circular bat. Or in pitching, there's so much skill with how you move your body and this and that. And then like in basketball, do you have technique? Can you shoot? Can you dribble? Can you do this and that? And so in sport, there's a lot of things that require skill, and that's a separate time of where you practice that. And then use the weight room to enhance your general qualities of being able to get stronger. But there's not necessarily just a complete blend of the two.
And I think this sports-specific era is new, and I don't think it's beneficial. I think
a lot of it, maybe not a lot of it, but I'm sure like just going on Instagram, you see a lot of people that just throw up different titles for different things. Whether it's intentional or not, it could just be just the way social media content is. Like that's
right. When the root of strength and conditioning was get bigger, faster, stronger in the weight room.
Yeah.
And then that makes you a better athlete, right? Obviously, we know it started with football. And football is obviously a very big strength sport, right? And so people were thinking from there, now we need to make it more detail. Now it looks good, right? And essentially, I'm going to bring this up, and I'm pretty sure it was Barcelona. I don't know if you saw it. Barcelona, their performance coaches having them jump on a box with a band and kick a ball, and then jump back on the box, kick a ball, right? So essentially doing a pass with a band. And that looks cool, right? And I'll be honest, I had athletes send me those videos and be like, let's do this. Like, can we do this? And it's like, well, I actually can't do that for you because ethically that I know that it's not doing what you think it's doing, right? We essentially want to make them stronger in a muscle stronger, a movement pattern stronger, or faster, or more powerful, and then they go and take that power and strength and transfer it into their pass. Mm-hmm. How good of a stimulus do you think we're giving a movement pattern or a kinetic chain requirement by just doing a pass with a band?
Yeah.
Right. How are we going to achieve an adaptation of strength or power? Obviously, it's way more efficient if we do it with an RDL or we do it with something that we can load heavier, and then your body takes that and applies it to a pass. I want to bring in this tweet. I don't know have you ever heard of Missy Macbeth, Coach Missy Macbeth? Mm-hmm. She works with volleyball players. She just released a book for coaches about training with volleyball players, and I love this tweet from her. I'm going to bring it. She says, the things we do in the weight room are not sport specific, particularly with developmental athletes, nor should we aim for them to be. Instead, we want to build a strong foundation for general athleticism. If you look at these exercises at the surface level, you might think these don't, and she's talking about volleyball here, none of those look like blocking, right? Because this is essentially going off of what parents think, right? They want a coach that wants them to block with resistance because that's sport specific, right? And she's saying, you're correct. But that's the tip of the iceberg. And she goes on to say, this is what's beneath the surface with the exercises. You're getting upper lower extremity coordination. You're being able to manipulate your nervous system and your base of support, flexion extension, stiffness improvement, functioning of stretch shortening cycle, improved contraction and relaxation. All of these things that don't look like the movement translate to performance, right? She was saying incorporating plyos, helps proper dosage, move the needle on volume for athletes' tissue toleration, or the athletes' tissues, what they can tolerate. So where you may be disappointed by the lack of specificity is actually a lot higher transfer. And that's why I think that's kind of the general argument is you actually have a higher transfer rate to performance the less sport specific it looks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because it comes back to a lot of people just need to get stronger. A lot of people just need to
bigger, fast, stronger.
Get movement patterns down.
And that essentially has a higher transfer performance-wise than making your athletes do the exact same movements that they do in their game and practice with resistance, right? You're not going to get that much of a performance increase unless we can do something that you can load heavily, number one, but also make resistance, make resilient, essentially, is what I want to say. Make resilient. So if you make them bigger, faster, stronger in a certain way, they can then apply it to their movement. I really like that from her. That's the best way to put it, essentially, is if you're looking for a performance coach, you don't want them to do things that make it look flashy or sport-specific. Essentially, you want a coach that's going to help you get the basics, get bigger, get stronger, get faster, more powerful, and then your body takes those abilities and then applies them.
Yep.
Needs analysis. What does your sport need? Energy systems. We're talking about anaerobic versus aerobic, depending on your sport. What does your sport require most? and kinetic chain requirements, posterior, anterior, ground force, force production into rotational force, all of that. That's essentially sport specific. That's what we're talking about.
No, but from a coach's perspective, like it's looking at just an athlete's history of have they trained before or what have they done for training. Looking at back to what we're talking about with we were talking about face value. We're talking about movement patterns. Like, what are their movement patterns? What do they do consistently? What are things that they have to get stronger in? What are things that typically are seen? Do they have to move laterally a lot? Is it a lot of jumping sport or things like that?
Mm-hmm.
And then also there's ways to do an assessment and see like littler things of what do they lack here or there. And that's where some specificity can come into play of depending on all those other factors of what else do they need and being able to give things of that within a program to help them out too. That's what I'd add to needs analysis.
Yeah, 100%.
Which was some of the same things.
Yeah, right. And I'll kind of move into freshness and recovery modalities, and you'll hear this a lot from people like Fred Duncan, Zach DeCant, other coaches, talking about freshness, recovery modalities. This goes hand in hand with in-season, obviously. And
I got a question for you though with that.
Uh-huh.
When you were playing, did you like any of those recovery modalities? Is there certain things that you liked personally?
I liked the compression boots, circulation things, things, I think. But even when I was taking, I still understood the body, and I still knew that I could get the exact same benefits by just going on a jog, because all it's doing is increasing circulation.
Mm.
I could also get the same benefits from taking a cold shower. I can also get the same benefits from taking a hot shower. I can get the same benefits from... Right, so I think the thing is, I want to go over... Obviously, that sleep and nutrition is always going to be the king when it comes to recovery.
That was more just like a personal. I was just curious.
Yeah.
In my experience, there was things I liked. I mean, this was before I really looked into any type of stuff like this.
And I also think that
it's more of like a personal preference, not out of like this is what the data says.
I also think that there's psychological benefits from these because you believe you're recovering. I also think there's a lot of data that goes into that if you feel like you're recovering, then you might have enhanced recovery, you know?
What's the whole placebo of like taking a pill?
Right. Placebo. But I think peaking fresh is important. And I think the reason why the biggest way to peak fresh, and what I mean by that is going into your competition in season with your body being the most ready, prepared, right? The number one way to do this is load management. That's the most effective. Not doing cupping the night before, right? It's managing your load and understanding that you can do, like, your strength training has to be high intensity but not too much volume so that you're sore. And
that's the benefit of having what we do as our jobs. We're stress managers.
Right, exactly.
And so, like, if you don't know some of these things, that's the benefit of there's people out there that this is what we know. This is what we do.
Right, exactly. And I think I saw a graphic on Instagram about it was a recovery pyramid, and I loved it so much. I think I posted it. It's on my on the AFA Sports Performance Instagram. It's on one of the story highlights that was saying it was a pyramid of recovery, and it was like at the top obviously was sleep, right? 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night, but also nutrition, proper nutrition, getting your macros in, protein, get your carbs in, muscle glycogen level replenishment, stuff like that. And then the farther it went down, it was like cold plunge, and then at the bottom was like massage gun and vibration therapy,
like stem stuff.
Stuff like that. That's
the biggest thing, is just making sure that your body has the ways it can recover, which that's by making sure you're eating properly, you have enough things for your body to process, so that whatever work you just did, whether that's practice, whether that's lifting, that your body can be able to recover from that. Because if your body's lacking nutrients, or if you only got like 3 hours of sleep, that's when your body's able to repair things and process things. And so if you're lacking those things, no amount of massage gunning.
Yeah, right. You're not touching the surface. And I think that's that whole peaking fresh is like a newer term. I guess that's kind of going around, but it's more of like performance coaching, understanding that whole, or strength coaches understanding the whole load management, where we would rather get less workouts in if it means that your body is fresh come match day. And I think the big term, I don't know if you've heard match day -1, game day -1.
Yeah.
Have you heard that term?
Yeah.
Essentially, that's the workout. The workout that's the most important workout is match day -1 or game day -1, where you're exposing the body to high intensity, so you're getting movement patterns firing with higher loads or heavier volume, or not volume but heavier loads, to get the nervous system firing, getting used to heavy movements, but not fatiguing the body, so that your body is ready the following day for match day, game day, where you have that stimulus kind of in the back pocket, but you're not fatigued, so you're fresh, you're ready to go. Performance is peaked come competition. But essentially, yeah, the overall goal of that was just is load management, and sleep and nutrition are going to go way farther for you as an athlete than cupping, stimming, cold plunge, sauna, massage gun, all that stuff.
Agreed. And it's not demonizing those things. It's just
right. I think tool.
Yep.
And I think they could be utilized more for almost injuries or knocks and dinks and stuff like that. But if you, again, want to become elite, essentially, go to the top, don't worry about the massage gun or the cupping or the massage, the massage session, or ask the ATs, hey, can you get, if you're sleeping 2 hours a night, it's not going to make a difference for you. Get the sleep in, get the volume management, mentally get prepared when comparing it to these other, because they're so big right now. Obviously, all those recovering modalities are so massive right now. Everybody's got a massage gun. Literally every athlete has a massage gun in their bag.
I had one too.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, is like even in college when you have those boots, right? Everything that's available to you, you take advantage of it. And it's almost like a part of your routine, essentially. But the big thing is, don't forget, if you don't sleep, it's not going to matter. What do you think is like a last cover message for athletes? We got an athlete training in season. Talk about what to focus on, what type of training they're looking at, and how to peak fresh.
I would say for in season, shorter, high intensity, still making sure with frequency that you're being consistent with it. And so that, as we talked about with, if you take 3 months off of anything, you're not going to be great at it. And then also throughout that season, and that performance-wise, if you're taking that time off, you're missing that, and your body's only going down. So just really stay consistent throughout the whole year, and that's where you're going to see the most progress.
100%. So essentially, summary-wise, get your strength training in, right? Strength train in season, maintain the gains. Don't go back to square one when the season's over. Get your speed training in. Look at training through a speed lens sometimes. I've seen the benefits. So we don't lose speed, we don't lose strength. That's the number one thing we want to focus on when it comes to the training itself, right? When we talk about sport-specific training, do movement patterns. Focus on movement patterns. Don't focus on essentially specific movements that you do in matches, stuff like that. Train for ability and apply the abilities to your sport. And sleep and eat over massage gun and cupping, right? That's pretty much the bulk of it. That's the summary. Training season, strength training season, speed training season, get your sleep, get your food in, and creatine. That's a good one. You got anything else to say?
I think it's solid.
So for this episode, we were talking about in-season training, peaking fresh, all that good stuff. We had Coach Caleb with us. If you want to kind of give a plug, your Instagram or anything like that, where you want to do DST training, promote yourself, whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Instagram's DST _Caleb, or also our Arizona page is DST _Arizona. Both of those have various content of things we do either with teams or with different private clients. So if you're interested in seeing like what sessions look like or just questions in general, you can send messages on there. Yeah.
Cool. Absolutely. And then I'm Coach Marcos. I run AFA Sports Performance, West Valley, Phoenix, mostly one-on-one athletes, strength training, all that good stuff. I got the website. This will be up on the website too. But I appreciate you coming in. We'll talk about giving advice to these athletes. That's kind of why I did this podcast, helping out athletes, giving you some advice on what to do, where to go. So, again, you're listening to the Become Elite podcast. Coach Marcos, Coach Caleb, and we'll see you in the next one.